guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbor put up illegal, no trespassing, signs on my own property and threatened to sue me. TLDR. Neighbor put up a no trespassing sign on my property and when I told him he threatened to sue me. When he was away, I built a fence with my own sign, and he got angry threatening me again. He then broke my fence and put his own sign back up. What he didn't know was that I installed cameras and got everything on tape. I then sued him and won because he didn't even show up to court and ended up with 30 days in jail for destruction of property and trespassing. I'm going to be honest, I really thought this wasn't going to be eventful enough at first to even be a story. I thought it would have just been something funny I could tell people about how stupid my neighbor was. I know that a lot of these stories where their neighbor is a total jerk people already have beef with them. Unfortunately, that isn't the case here due to two major facts. One of which is that we have big houses and live in sort of rural area with a lot of forest, so it isn't like we are living right on top of each other like in a city. The other thing being that we are all just pretty private people and while everyone can recognize the neighbors, we don't really interact much with them. Some people we are friends with around us seem to intentionally avoid a specific neighbor though that lives fairly close to us, so we do the same without really being told much about him. All I know is that he is a hunter and spends a lot of time away from his house and in the woods. That is fine by us because as far as anyone can tell he is hunting legally and not putting anyone in danger. I would have been totally happy if we were just able to live our two separate lives and never have to interact with each other. Unfortunately, one day that all seemed to go out the window when I saw a no trespassing sign on my lawn. I know for a fact that neither me nor my wife had put that there, so I went to take a closer look. The sign said, no trespassing, property of, neighbor. I know that this part of land though is mine even though it is a little bit of a distance from both of our actual houses. Still maybe he accidentally put it in the wrong spot. I went to his house to return it and tell him, but he wasn't there so I left it on his porch with a note. I thought that was the end of it and he was going to realize his mistake and move the sign accordingly. Instead, I was woken up at 2 a.m. by the furious knocking on my door and my wife in a complete panic of not knowing what was going on. I ran downstairs with a bat. Late night visitors aren't a common occurrence here and I wanted to be ready. I look through the peephole though and see that it is just neighbor and put the bat down and open the door. Neighbor. What the hell is with this note you left me? You go on my property and take away my sign. You just think you can do anything you please? He is yelling and adding in some colorful language that I am just going to omit, and you can use your imagination. Me. I told you in the note that I took it down because it was on my property. You still have the sign so you can just put it in the right spot. Calm down. That was the day I learned telling someone who was irrationally angry to calm down was a really bad move. Neighbor. Don't you dare be telling me to calm down when you pull this on me. I am going to give you one warning and tomorrow my sign is going back up onto my property. And if I catch you stepping foot on my property, I am going to sue you and have to arrested for trespassing when I clearly had a no trespassing sign. At this point I was tired and a little scared about his behavior. I managed to tell him that I was going to sleep and other excuses that seemed to appeal to him enough that I was able to shut my door and get back to bed. That night though I couldn't really sleep because I was so annoyed at what he said and knew that I was going to wake up to that sign being back on my property. And sure, if he sued me and the property was found to be mine, I wouldn't get in any trouble. I'm busy though and I think of worst case scenarios like if I was wrong or told wrong about where the property lines were. The next morning when I saw the sign again, I went back into my house and called for someone from the town to come and evaluate the property line. A day later he came out and confirmed that his sign for no trespassing was indeed on my property. Now I knew for sure that I couldn't get sued for being on my own land and it was time to put some revenge into action. When you live in a rural area you can be sure of two things: you are having some extra time on your hands, and your hunting fanatic neighbor being all but invisible during the peak of hunting season. So, when he was gone, I constructed a fence and on it put my own no trespassing sign with cameras. Also, I didn't bother returning his sign this time because he had his chance, and I just threw it out. I also had asked the town to please send the map of where the property line was to neighbor. You would think when he got back, he would realize that he lost, but where would the fun of revenge be if that was the case? Besides, it took a lot of time putting up that fence and cameras. As you can probably guess, he was not happy to see his sign gone and replaced with another one and a fence. I had him pounding at my door once again, this time at a much more reasonable hour though. Neighbor. What did I tell you about trespassing on my property? I swear I am going to sue you and take everything you have. Me. Look in your mailbox as the official town record of where the land divisions are. You can clearly see that the land is my property. You can go ahead and try to sue me for trespassing on my own land, but we both know that you aren't going to get that far. Neighbor. We will see about that. He left and I, accidentally, forgot to mention that I had cameras watching every inch of my property now. It only took a couple hours until night fell for him to go out there with bolt cutters, cut a hole in my fence for him to walk though and destroy my sign. Then putting another one with his name on it up in its place. Like I said before, I didn't want to deal with going to court, so I told him that I had the tape of his trespassing and destroying my property. If he paid me for it and stayed off my land, I wasn't going to sue him. He didn't agree to that solution, and I had to now sue him, or he would never leave me alone. Court was actually easier than I thought it would be because I didn't even need to refute any of the false lies he was going to come up with. Simply because he didn't show up because he felt going hunting again was more important. So, he lost and had to pay me. Also, apparently destroying a fence is serious here and he was going to jail for 30 days. The next story is titled, Despite the Will, My Aunt Karen Thinks My Parents' Property Belongs to Her. This happened almost 5 years ago, and I just got notice yesterday that my entitled Aunt Karen has just died, and I got a call from her husband asking me to attend the funeral next weekend and I declined. As did my older brother, Mark, for purposes of this story. Karen was my mother's older sister and she constantly interfered in my mother and her children's lives. She never liked my father and always tried to tell my mother that she made a mistake by marrying him. She didn't like the name my parents picked out for my older brother, and my great-grandmother died the day before I was born, and when Karen found out they were going to name me after her, Karen freaked out and said she wanted to name her potential future kid that so my mother couldn't use it. Then she tried to talk her out of it by saying it's too old-fashioned and kids would make fun of me, which they did, but for other reasons. See my username for a clue. She criticized both my brothers and my choice of friends and even complained when I started playing softball, because proper ladies didn't play sports, and if her daughter ever tried playing a sport, she would have her removed from the team. Spoiler, she never had children. The day after my 16th birthday, my parents drove on a business trip down to California. I live in Idaho. My dad said that when they got back, he would drive me to the DMV to get my license. He never did, because on the drive to California, they hit a patch of ice, spun out, crashed, and died. I was a wreck for some time after that. I didn't even want to attend my high school graduation later because my parents wouldn't be there. They will split everything evenly between my brother and me. At the funeral, my parents, who owned their own business, production manager, Tim, was talking to my brother, and my brother told him that in a couple weeks, he would step in and take over, and he was counting on Tim to run things smoothly until then and help him in taking it over and learning the ropes. I had no interest in the business, other than it was a guaranteed summer job when I was growing up, so I stayed out of it and just collected profit checks until I sold my half to Mark, and he continues to run the business to this day. Mark told Tim that he should assure the employees there that their jobs were safe and that no major changes would be made. Then one day, Aunt Karen showed up and began putting her stuff in my parents' office, and when Tim confronted her about this, she said his services were no longer needed and he was fired. Tim called Mark up and Mark went down with the family attorney, some police, and the necessary paperwork, and had her removed, while she said the place was now hers because it was her sister's, so she was now the owner. As long as I have known her, she has never had a steady job, and has had 3 husbands, not counting the man who called me, never met him, and milked each one for as much as she could get until she divorced him. The next day, I was leaving for school. I walked, it was fairly close, about 10 minutes, and saw her car and a moving van parked outside. She said she was moving into her house and then said in a sickly sweet voice that for a reasonable rent, she would continue to allow me to stay there until I graduated high school. I went in and called my brother, and he again showed up with the family attorney, police, and all the paperwork and had her removed from the property. I was at school, so I didn't get to see what happened, but that night, Mark gave me a business card for a policeman, who I assume helped deal with all this, and told me that if I ever saw Aunt Karen on or near the property to call that number and report her immediately. Don't even try to confront her or give her a warning, just call. I do know that the movers charged her to move her stuff into the van, drive across town, get turned away and drive back across town and move her stuff back into her apartment, which she hadn't given notice yet. I got scared to the point that I didn't like letting our dog into the backyard when I was at school. I used to put her out in the yard to let her play in the fenced backyard while I was in school. For a while, I just put her in the locked and closed garage, and then cleaned up her messes when I got home in the afternoon. Eventually, Karen moved to Colorado, where I assume she met and married the man who called me and said that she had died, and he couldn't find anyone from her family to attend the funeral. I chose not to tell him about her, politely said, "Sorry for your loss, but I can't make it." From discussions with Mark, he basically told him the same thing. Outside of myself, Mark, and Mark's infant daughter, I don't think she has any living relatives. I still own the house. Mark gave me his half as part of the deal where I sold him my half of the business, but still sleep in my bedroom. I refuse to move into what was once my parents' bedroom, the master bedroom, go to the local university, go Broncos, and still miss my parents and think about them every day. And even though I am 21 in less than 2 weeks, own a large home, have a lot of money in the bank, I would trade it all to have my parents back, but I don't care about the how or why of Aunt Karen's death. Thank you for reading and sorry for the length. The next story is titled, "A Crazy Lady Pulls a Rifle on My Father Who Was Just Trying to Deliver Luggage for Delta Airlines." To clarify, this was a couple of years ago. My father did roadie, a delivery service company, full-time to earn an extra buck or two. This time he was delivering some luggage for Delta Airlines to someone who had maybe forgot their luggage or something else. Story begins. My father was trying to make a luggage delivery on the countryside of Rock Hill, SC. My father ended up making a left turn instead of right due to it being pitch dark and him not being able to see the house number. He hit a dead end while trying to make a U-turn, which led to the entrance of someone's property, the elderly lady. That was apparently the only way to make the U-turn. Now we begin the crazy part. The elderly lady comes out with a rifle and screams, "What the hell are you doing on my property and who the hell are you?" while pointing the rifle at him. My father calmly says, "I'm with roadie trying to deliver for Delta Airlines for customer." He tried to call the customer 2 to 3 times, but she wouldn't answer. Finally, she called him back and he said, "There's a White House near your block and there's a lady pulling a rifle at me. I couldn't find your house because it's super dark." The customer then says, "That's my crazy aunt, get out." To sum it up, my father tells the crazy lady that it was her niece and she lets him go. Thank the Lord she didn't shoot him. The last story is titled, "New Property Owners Try to Claim Public Property as Private." A story about entitled new property owners. So, at this lake that I've been going to for years, the setup for private and public property is confusing to say the least. There are sections where the land and the beachfront, separated by a common use road, are both private property, and sections where the land is private, but the beachfront is public. We've had some new people move to the lake recently who have been causing a stir trying to claim the beach as private property despite being zoned as public. Some backstory, for this section in particular there is a front row of cabins and a back row of cabins. For the public sections, the back row uses these sections to put their docks and equipment in the water, then stores the equipment on the shore during the winter. One of my friends, M, has been dealing with a new neighbor on the back row directly behind their property. My other friend, N, would usually store his boat lift on M's beachfront, which is at the edge of the public zone and should be a non-issue. The new neighbor, W, is claiming that they have priority rights to the beachfront in front of M's property and that N should not be allowed to store their equipment there and is not willing to negotiate. We spoke with M and sent them with a bottle of rum to try and negotiate with W and waiting to hear back on this. Another new neighbor that moved in, S, is on the front row across the street from the beachfront where my third friend, F, stores their equipment along with another neighbor. F has been at the lake with this setup since at least the mid-90s and S is beyond belligerent by blocking the middle of the beachfront to prevent F and the other neighbor not only from storing their equipment on the beachfront but also preventing access to the lake with snowmobiles in the winter. This again is on public land. In the case of S, perhaps they were sold on the property thinking or being told that the beachfront was included as private, but considering their actions poking into other people's business including my own by giving me hell for driving a golf cart around because he thinks the roadway should only be for cars or bicycles. I'm more annoyed with S than I am with W, but am I being unreasonable thinking there is a way to come to a compromise before I call in a land surveyor? Thank you for listening.